Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to do a part 2 of my autoimmune journey with Susac syndrome. I know I did a brief overview a couple weeks ago, but I wanted to do a more detailed story about my journey so that people who are trying to navigate this space can know what to expect and what it looks like. And I remember when I was going through it, I felt so lost and so confused. So I just wanted to give a more detailed story about what that looked like. So remember, for bite-sized tips on how to get your autoimmune under control, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell to be notified every time I post a new video every Sunday morning. Let's get to it. Remember hearing that corny saying, your health is your wealth? Makes me want to roll my eyes, but honestly, when I'm not feeling well, I don't want to do anything. I think we can all agree on that. Most of you watching this video right now are experiencing some sort of autoimmune syndrome. It's an invisible disease. You don't know if it's happening. You can't look at someone and say, oh, they have an autoimmune syndrome. We're quietly struggling with this on our own. Or you might have a friend or family member who is trying to navigate the space. Susac's initially began one day with what felt like a stomach virus the day after 4th of July. So my initial thought was, oh dang, I think I just partied a little too hard last night. I went home and I still felt so sick. Usually when I have a stomach virus, I can lie in bed, get through it, drink liquids, all of that stuff. But this time felt a little bit different. And I think my parents realized, hours later, I was still dying with pain. I had shooting pains in my stomach. I had a throbbing headache, and they ended up calling an ambulance. And that was my first visit to the ER. To the ER was pretty standard stuff. They did a CT scan, which came back normal. They gave me sodium chloride, and I felt fine the next day. So they dispatched me and I went home. But later that week, I went to go get a blood test with my mom and my sister just to make sure all my levels were fine. We were on our way back from the hospital, and I began to have an irrational conversation with my mom and my sister, and words were coming out of my mouth, but I felt like I was speaking a different language. And when my mom looked over at me, she saw the left side of my mouth was starting to droop. And so she got nervous. She turned the car around and we went straight to the hospital for the second time. So the second time that I went to the hospital, by the time we got there, I was in this zombie-like state. I was awake but completely unresponsive, and I couldn't really answer simple questions or even follow simple commands like, please provide a urine sample or take a seat in this wheelchair. So the doctors admitted me once again, and they did a bunch of tests like MRIs and things like that, but all of it was coming back clean. They didn't really know what was happening or where to even start. Things eventually went back to normal and I felt fine, so I got to go home. A couple days later, I actually was in the shower and I felt extremely fatigued. Things started to go numb. I got spots in my eyes while I was in the shower, and my parents realized that I was in the shower for quite a long time, came to check on me, realized that I was essentially passed out in the shower, and knew that I was having another episode. So we went back to the hospital, and every time we went to the hospital, they would tell the doctors that I was a stroke patient because we didn't have a name for what was happening to me. When we got to the hospital, the doctor this time wanted to do a spinal tap or a lumbar puncture. So your doctor will order a spinal tap to evaluate the CSF protein levels in your brain, or a cerebrospinal fluid test, and it's when they suspect something is wrong in the nervous system or suspect a central nervous system disease, and the test gives them access to the clear fluid that surrounds the brain. The doctor is going to give you a local anesthesia for your lumbar puncture, and the doctor will tell you that it's going to be a bigger needle and it's going to go in your lower back. You need to lie completely still because you can risk paralysis or death, but I'm here to tell you that you have nothing to worry about. It's not as crazy scary as they make it sound, and it will be over pretty quickly. So when my tests came back, they showed an elevated level of protein, and that just basically tells the doctor, hey, something isn't right in the brain. And at this point, the neurosurgeon said it could be lupus or it could be MS, and we'd need to do 15 to 20 more spinal taps to get a better sense of what was going on. 15 to 20. This diagnosis just didn't feel right in my gut. Obviously, no one wants to hear that they have lupus or MS, but I just want to take a second to shed light on the importance of getting a second opinion and the importance for advocating for yourself when you are in the hospital. I mean, doctors obviously always have the best intentions, but that doesn't mean they will always get it right the first time. So remember to ask questions. I put a link in the bio of some questions I found on Times Magazine that I felt like hit the nail on the head and did a great job of kind of rounding up the best questions you can ask doctors when you are in the hospital and want to know more about what's going on and how to kind of navigate the situation. So at this point, I was in and out of the hospital for about a month and a half, and I honestly was feeling so lost, so confused, and extremely angry because there wasn't a name for what I was going through. I didn't know what was happening to me. Maybe I was just losing my mind. Every time I got on social media, I was seeing all of my friends get amazing, cool new jobs, getting married. They were traveling to places, and I wanted that to be me. And I was asking, why me? This feels so unfair. I was just so happy weeks ago. Life was crumbling around me, and I didn't ask for this, and it wasn't helping my mental state. And honestly, it took me too long to realize that I needed a professional's advice, and I needed professional help. So if you are just starting your journey, I highly recommend finding a therapist. You're not supposed to figure it out on your own, and you shouldn't have to. I did join a Facebook group, but honestly, it wasn't enough. I highly recommend stopping everything you're doing right now and getting that professional advice. I didn't really have any experience being in the hospital so regularly, so they did demand that I be moved to Emory Eastside's main campus, and I feel like this made all the difference for me because once I was there, I was assigned a group of researchers and a doctor, and they took my symptoms a little bit more seriously. They performed a myriad of tests, and one of the more important tests that they assigned to me was a fluorescein angiogram. Fluorescein angiogram is a medical procedure in which a fluorescent dye is injected into the bloodstream, and the dye ends up highlighting the blood vessels in the back of the eye so that they can be photographed. And we know that the eyes are the windows to the brain, and so this revealed that I had a bunch of lesions in my brain, and lesions are areas of damage. We know the brain is the most complex organ and is responsible for processing judgment, thinking, learning, memory, and the fluorescein angiogram revealed what an MRI couldn't catch. And so days later, I was diagnosed with Susac syndrome, and I was just so relieved to have a name for what was happening to me and to know that I could have a treatment plan now that we knew exactly what it was. To start off with, I got a prescription of 40 milligrams of steroids. I finally got to go home. Yay. But little did I know that that would come with a whole new set of problems. So stick around. I'm going to talk about IVIG, salsa, and other things that I did to heal, but also your dosage of steroids is typically determined by your doctor, and they look at the intensity of the situation you're in and also your weight and different things like that. So once I got home, I started to have debilitating migraines, and I was someone who never even got headaches, and I started to have these massively painful migraines, and I would just lie in the fetal position in the dark for hours, and taking 7 to 8 Advil and Tylenol a day wasn't really helping. So at the same time, my face was completely changing because of the steroids. I was hungry all the time. I started to break out. Steroids created a whole nother slew of problems that I wasn't even prepared for. I'm going to do a more specific episode on steroids and how it affected my body and what to look out for and what to expect when you are taking them. During these next few months, I experienced my first bouts of panic attacks, insomnia, major depression, and my parents actually had friends who told us about Cleveland Clinic in Ohio because they had previously lived in Ohio, and that's where I found Dr. Renenbaum, who had devoted his whole life to researching Susac syndrome, which was a rare and lesser-known autoimmune disease. And this was a turning point in my sickness, and he was a godsend. So Dr. Renenbaum was working congruently with my neurologist in Atlanta, and they put me on IVIG and salsa, and I'll go into more detail about what that looks like later. But at this point, I continue to have Susac's episodes at least once a month, once every 2 months, and for me, the symptoms were always the same, so I knew exactly how to catch it. And it'd start in my hands would start to go numb, or I'd see spots in my eyes, I'd start to lose my hearing a little bit, or I'd get really moody at times. An episode happens when your blood vessels that supply blood to your retinal arteries gets blocked, and so Susac attacks 3 different parts of the body, and it's called the trifecta, and it's going to be your eyes, your ears, and your brain, and depending on the severity of the disease, it could affect all 3. So salsa is going to prevent certain types of cells from multiplying and is important for creating new strands of DNA. So it does weaken the body's immune system and is more commonly used for patients fighting lupus. And IVIG is intravenous immune globulin. I know it's a mouthful, but it's human plasma made of antibodies from 1,000 or more healthy donors, and it's used to fight infections in the body. And typically this is given really slowly over 6 to 7 hours, so as to avoid any sort of reaction. And I went to Emory's outpatient cancer center to receive my IVIG at least once a month, and I know at-home IVIG is also an option, but it is more expensive because when you are going in the hospital to get your IVIG, you're already averaging around $20,000 a bag, but obviously I would send that to insurance. But if you're at home, the costs will skyrocket significantly. I know being diagnosed with an autoimmune syndrome is devastating, and not knowing if you have one or not, or what's wrong with your body, is truly more terrifying. And on top of not feeling well, autoimmune is really financially crippling in America's broken healthcare system. We know that not all insurance is created equal, but I know it wasn't for me. Take a deep breath. I want you to focus on the things that are in your control and the things you can control. And I want to create a space where we can provide love and support and compassion for each other. But before I leave, I did want to suggest this book. I thought this author did a great job of describing the autoimmune journey since it was so similar to mine. I highly recommend it for anyone who's going through something similar. If you like this video, please share it so we can bring awareness to more invisible diseases like this one, and subscribe so you can be notified when I post a new video on Sunday mornings. Comment below and let me know how I can serve you if you have any questions or things you'd like me to make videos about. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.